Okay. Hi, everyone. I see people are kind of coming in. I'm going to give people maybe like 1 to 2 minutes before I go ahead and get started. So for the people just coming in, I am going to go ahead and get started at like 2:02. That way people have a chance to join before I go ahead and get into the content. I just realized that y'all probably could not hear me. Um, can y'all hear me now? I really, yeah, sorry about that, y'all. I did a whole introduction of myself and my microphone was off. So That kind of sucks, and I'm a little embarrassed, but thanks y'all for whoever raised their hand. You showed me. Yeah, okay. Thanks, y'all. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and start back at the beginning. Okay. So, hello. Again, sorry. So sorry. My name is Kai. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on addressing feedback, getting through it quickly and efficiently. So like I said, but you guys didn't hear anything. This call is being recorded, so so you will have access to that recording within about 24 to 48 hours after this call is done. Sierra has left some information in the chat about that. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and either ask her in the chat or like I said, there's some information in the chat. Additionally, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to write in the chat your questions, or there should be a Q&A section in that little drop-down menu at the top. So either or, you can either ask in the Q&A section or in the chat. I will get to it at the very last slide of this PowerPoint. I have a section kind of dedicated for questions and answers. Okay. And then finally, stick around to the end. I do have some information on how Statistics Solutions as a company can help you with your dissertation process. Okay. Now let's actually get into the meat and the potatoes of this. Okay. So, committee and chair feedback is an important step in the dissertation process. However, this process is often overlooked when students are planning for timelines, and therefore addressing feedback can become really overwhelming for a number of students. So in this webinar today, we're going to talk about addressing feedback in a quick and timely manner, as well as kind of giving you some important tips and helpful tips to be able to get through this. Okay. So while this first point might seem self-explanatory, the first thing that you should always do before starting the process of addressing comments is to thoroughly read through all of the feedback that you have been given. So as you read through each comment, take notes on how you might attempt to address the feedback, or write down any questions that you may have about what you are expected to do. What is important here is that you make sure you thoroughly understand the feedback that you have been given before attempting to fix it. That being said, do not be afraid to ask your chair or your committee member questions. Another important thing is to stay organized. So you should always be working on a different copy of the document after you've been given a feedback. So what I always do is I've been given feedback to something. I will literally do save as, and then, save that document with the feedback again on my computer. At one of them is named feedback and the other one's named like maybe revised. And that way you work in the new document, you revise all of that stuff in the new document, but then you still have an old document with all of that feedback, just in case, your mentor comes back to you and says, what did I say like 2 months ago? I can't remember. You still have access to that feedback later down the line, even if you've completed it or fixed it, right? So it can also be helpful, you should always be working in a different document so you don't lose the comments later down the line. It can also be helpful for each new iteration of a draft to be saved, so you can always go back and see what you've changed. So some professors will ask you to take a paragraph out 1 month, but then change their minds another month later. And so it's going to be easier for you if you have all of those versions on hand that you're able to pull from. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick and then I'll go ahead and move on. Okay. So back to kind of my point earlier where I was talking about it being okay to reach out to your committee members or your chair members about questions, right? So many students remark that they are hesitant to reach out to their chairperson for fear of looking dumb or silly or like they don't understand what's going on, right? However, it can be really easy to misinterpret a comment on a Word document or an email. So if you do have any questions, just reach out to your chair because they are there to help you. You can't thoroughly answer something if you don't feel as though you understand it. And part of your chair's job is to help guide you through this editing process. And the main thing though is to be very clear about what you don't understand. So instead of just sending a comment back, maybe they say something along the lines of, I need you to do this, this, and this. I need you to fix this paragraph, add something to this paragraph, and do something else. And that's like a 3-part comment, right? And then you just respond to them and you say, oh, well, I just don't understand. And that's the extent to what you're talking to them about. They're going to come back to you and say, which part of my 3-point comment did you not understand? So you need to be clear so that you don't have any of these back and forths, because that's what's going to take up the most of your time. A lot of these times, your professors, your chair, your mentors, they've got a lot of other stuff going on too. And one, they probably don't appreciate the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Not that it's, always a bad thing. But a lot of the times they are really busy, especially depending on the time of year in which you're getting feedback. If it's the end of the semester, they're also probably doing a number of other things. And so they're going to get annoyed if you're not very clear about what exactly you don't understand and what you're asking a question about. So once you feel as though you fully understand the content of the feedback, that's when you can start spending your time addressing each comment one by one. So make sure to thoroughly address each comment. As like I was saying earlier, you don't want your chair or your committee member to ask you to make the same changes multiple times. And also add as much detail as you possibly can when addressing each point. This is because it's always easier to take information out later than it is to add back more at the end of the line. So sometimes, even if you have asked your chair clarifying questions, you may have to push back on your mentor's feedback. So this can be incredibly nerve-wracking, but sometimes it is very necessary. So while this isn't the case for every chairperson or committee member, certain feedback may or may not be helpful or even appropriate for your study. So for example, if you're running a qualitative study and a committee member asks you for a quantitative analysis, that's, first off, that's a little out of the ballpark of what your current study was about. And 2, that's not necessarily very helpful if your study was a qualitative design rather than a quantitative design. Alternatively, sometimes the comments that are made just seem nitpicky, arbitrary, or not within the scope of your study. So a good example of this is when I was defending my thesis. I believe for my master's specifically, I believe that a couple of my committee members during my defense, they had questions kind of regarding what if I had done this differently? What if I had added this variable instead of this variable? And I was like, y'all, I really appreciate the comments and the questions, but some of these are just not within the scope of what I was specifically looking for. They're adding variables in that don't really make sense for my study specifically. And that could be really, really, really nerve-wracking to say, hey, no, I'm not going to do this, right? And so when you are pushing back on some feedback, make sure to keep an open and professional line of communication between you and your committee members. So while pushing back on this feedback can be necessary, it is really important to do it in a respectful manner, instead of either you getting defensive and lashing out, or alternatively, your committee or chair member getting defensive and lashing out. I've seen it plenty of times where someone is understandably pushing back on their feedback, but they've kind of said it in a way that, like I said earlier, things can get really misconstrued in emails and over, a Word document. And there's not always a lot of tone indicators in those messages. And so I just last week I saw a client kind of pushing back on some feedback and getting a really rude response back from their committee member. But then when I had looked at what she had actually said in terms of pushing back, I was like, oof. This just was not the most professional way to kind of go about it. And so ultimately, barring any large and glaring issues that, change the scope of your study or something like that, it is your dissertation. This is your project. And so you should not let the feedback push you into a position in which either you don't understand what's going on anymore or that you don't feel comfortable defending. And so usually if you justify with your reasoning, most committee members are going to agree with you. A lot of times they're just asking these questions to make sure that your brain is kind of on the right track and that you're in the right thinking space. And I don't want to say like, oh, it's a trick question, because it's definitely not a lot of the times, but sometimes committee members can get maybe a little overzealous, ask too much of you. And as long as you're able to explain like, hey, maybe this isn't in the scope of my study. Hey, this is a really great idea, but maybe I add this in the future direction section rather than completely changing my entire study for this. And so stuff like that, as long as you are respectful about it, and aren't getting defensive, it should go well. And then kind of similar, but a little bit different, is incongruent feedback. And so this is another roadblock that you might run into during your editing process. And what this means is that sometimes you'll find that your chair and your committee member, or one of your committee members versus another committee member, or basically two people on your team, are at odds regarding the changes that they think that should be done. And so this is really when you need to talk to your chair. So your chair is your advocate, and they're also your first and last line of defense, defense in quotation marks, against your committee members. And so you're going to want to discuss with your chairperson which feedback you think is more helpful and appropriate for your study. So, you can say, hey, this person said that they want me to do this analysis, but this person is saying that this analysis is a little bit stronger. You'll go to your chair and you'll talk about your thought process between it. So you could say something along the lines of like, I agree with person one about this analysis, but I'm really leaning towards person two's with this analysis. What should I do? And that's when, like I said, your chairperson is going to be able to help you kind of walk through these questions that you might have together. And then afterwards, after you've done this, instead of you going to those committee members with the incongruent feedback, this is actually a time in which your chair should then speak with the committee members from there. And so while with feedback that might not be as helpful for you, that you want to push back on, that's okay to kind of talk to them directly, as long as you're doing it respectfully. I think when it comes to, picking one person over the other, having your chair be able to explain the reasoning to each committee member is usually a better way to go. And only do this if you are asked to do it yourself. So if your chair member says, oh no, actually you can explain it to so and so and so and so, that's the only time that I would suggest actually going to them directly about incongruent feedback. And every other time it should come through your chair, because it can be seen as disrespectful if that's kind of how you're doing it. I hope that makes sense. And I can answer questions about incongruent feedback a little bit better in the Q&A section if anybody does have any questions. Okay. And then I also really wanted to talk about tracking your changes or indicating your changes. And so some chairs have very specific instructions for this and some do not. But even if you are not directly told that you need to do this, I think this is a very helpful tool. And so, using track changes or highlighting where your changes are is a really good tool in terms of showing everyone on the committee, everyone involved in your research, what has been changed, where it was changed, and when it was changed, right? And track changes in Word is a really good way to do this. Additionally, there's something known as a change matrix, and I love change matrix when it comes to addressing feedback. And so what a change matrix is basically just an Excel sheet. It's like a fancy word for making an Excel sheet where your Excel sheet is going to indicate who commented the feedback. So which specific committee member asked for that feedback to be done. What exact, one column is kind of all of that, right? The next column is what exactly did you do to change the feedback? Did you add something? Did you delete something? Did you, add a reference, so on and so forth, right? Next column is when that feedback was actually done. And then, the last column can be, was there any other additional comments after I had already done this feedback? And that way, you can share that. Not only can you have that for yourself, but you can share that with your other committee members, because a lot of the times committee members aren't going to talk to each other on your specific project, especially if you're sending them separate documents. So not really having discussions together. And so sending them a document or sharing them an Excel document or, some sort of Google Forms document of some kind can really help them to see, okay, well, this person asked for this, and this is how you changed it, and this is when you changed it. That way, also a lot of the times, when people are, they're looking back, that way your committee member isn't asking you to do the same thing multiple times. And you're also knowing that you're not asking them to make the same comment multiple times. Like I said, change matrix and track changes can be really, really helpful in terms of kind of really understanding where you are in the process, and then having other people understand where you are in the process as well. So another important tip for the feedback process is to make sure that you're using all of the resources available to you. So many school libraries have librarians or research assistants that can help you, including with helping with writing if your library has something like a writing center. Alternatively, they can just point you in the right direction of appropriate databases or anything like that. Additionally, editing services such as Statistics Solutions, so us, we are paid to help with APA feedback as well as general committee feedback. So if that is something that you're interested in, stick around to the end of this PowerPoint. And then finally, your peers and your cohort members are always a good resource for bouncing these ideas off of. And as long as, you're not cheating off of each other, as long as, you're not plagiarizing each other, it can really help with your cohort members to go, my committee member asked me to do this, and I'm not really sure what they're asking. Could you read it and then read my sentence and see what you would do in that situation? Consulting your peers is very, very helpful. And even just on more than addressing feedback, I would urge you to consider talking with your peers or your cohort members to be able to help you through this process. So finally, this is kind of the last slide I have of content. It is important to be timely with your feedback. So it takes time to diligently address feedback for a section of a paper or proposal. And it also takes time for your committee members to actually make that feedback, to give that feedback. And so not only is the reviewing of the feedback process takes a long time, but also to review and give feedback, it takes some time. And so before starting this process, I do urge you to talk very candidly with your mentors and your chair people, as well as your committee members about the deadlines that you have and how long they specifically would need to provide a review. Overall, try to be mindful of your timeline so that you're not getting stuck making major revisions at the very end with an unrealistic timeline. Okay. So like I said, I do have a Q&A section at the end of this slide, but I did want to just talk really, really quickly, kind of before I stop talking. I'm going to talk really quickly about our company, Statistics Solutions. So Statistics Solutions is a full service dissertation consulting company, and we provide graduate students and research professionals with timely and editorial support for their dissertations and scholarly projects. And so what that means is that we really help with every aspect of the dissertation process. So whether that is coming up with a topic, to all the way to helping you prep for your defense by helping you make a PowerPoint, right? So we do everything in between, survey upload, data analysis, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, kind of all of the above, right? And so if you are interested in kind of our services and what we do, we do have complimentary 30-minute consultations, so free 30-minute consultations from Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, right? If you are interested in that, I'm going to keep this information up on the screen. There's an email and a phone number for you to have access to. So I'll keep this up on the screen while I'm answering questions from the Q&A section. Okay. Okay, got one question. It's kind of long, so give me 1 second. Yeah, okay. So I'm just, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go ahead and read out what you had written, and then we'll kind of talk through what I would do in this situation. So you wrote, I defended my dissertation for basic qualitative analysis. My methodologist said it sounded more like a case study to her, but it was a proof for basic qual. Now she's saying that I need to change my methods to a case study, or she will challenge when I defend my dissertation. My chair does not feel like I need to change anything because the professor of advanced qual is the one who said I should do basic qual. How do I handle this situation? I don't feel like this is my dissertation anymore. That's a really tough situation, and I totally understand you not feeling like this is your dissertation anymore. That really sucks. And that kind of gets back to what I was talking about in terms of not letting you get pushed into a spot in which you're not really feeling all that comfortable about defending anymore. And like I said, that's really hard. So if you have talked to your chair and they have said that they don't really feel like you should change anything, I really do think you should go back to them and talk to them about maybe reaching out to that committee member, or seeing if they want you to reach out to that committee member. Like I said, if your chair or you are able to give them good reasoning as to why you want to do just a basic qual, you don't want to do a case study, then they should be able to, especially since you actually defended and were, I assume, approved for a basic qual study before they're needing these changes. Ultimately, if your chair is saying that you need to do it, that really sucks, and can be a kind of hard situation to put yourself in. But ultimately, like I said, it is your dissertation, it is your project. You don't want to feel like this is something that's not yours. And so I would recommend kind of pushing back on that committee member, hopefully with the help of your chair, if your chair is willing to help you out with that. And then if not, and if your chair is kind of saying, no, I'm not going to help push back on that, this again kind of sucks to do, but go over their head. Go to the department chair and talk to the department chair. Say that you were, you defended the proposal was approved, and now this is what is happening, right? And like I said, it can be a really nerve-wracking and kind of uncomfortable situation to be in, to go over people's heads, but sometimes for the sake of your own sanity and for the sake of your own dissertation, it just needs to be done. And so I know that's probably not the best answer. I know it's a lot of it depends. And it depends answers kind of suck, but it really does depend. And I really hope you get that figured out. But yeah, like I said, definitely go to your chair and see what they can do to help you out first. Okay. I'm not seeing very many other questions. Bunch of people saying thank you, and thank you guys for joining, and thank you to the people who did ask a question. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate when people are engaged. Also, thank you for telling me that my mic was not on, or whoever did that, whoever raised their hand. You are a lifesaver, because I fully was about to do like a 40-minute presentation with no mic on. And that would have sucked. So I really appreciate that. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day. I'm going to go ahead and keep this screen up for like 1 or 2 more minutes so that anyone has a chance to write things down. But it is kind of the last of the content that I do have for everyone. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day or night, if it is not day for you. Dang, a bunch of people saying good night. So good night to all y'all. I hope you have a wonderful night. It's solidly day for me, but I hope you have a great rest of your night. Yeah, that makes sense. Approaching midnight. Dang, you're up late. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share and end the recording. Like I said, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day or night. And I hope to see your name or your face around Statistics Solutions soon.